Are you looking to get a head start on first quarter? Here at Change Coaches, we prepare people to lead in today's workplace. And we do that, leadership and organizational coaching, everything ranging from one-on-one executive coaching to group coaching related to certain competencies that you love middle managers to learn. We also offer keynotes, and those keynotes are based on the Leading Below the Surface book. And then finally, our most exciting offering that we just recently launched is empathy-based sales training. So we will get your sales team in a room, be able to develop them, train them, bring in more sales, and also bring you in more connections with customers. To learn more, visit changecoaches.io or email info@changecoaches.io. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leading Below the Surface podcast. I'm your host, LaTonya Wilkins. And before we dive into today's episode, which is all about resiliency, resilient leadership, my journey with accepting resiliency as a concept and something that we need to lead in today's workplace, I'd love for all of you that are listening today, whether you're listening on YouTube, if you could subscribe on YouTube. If there's parts of this that resonate, if you could share it with your friends. Also, if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast app like Spotify or your preferred podcast app like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you're listening, if you could please follow and let us know what's resonating with you and why you listen to our podcast. That would be great. So as I said, today's topic is all about resilient leadership below the surface. So in today's topic, I'm going to talk a lot about, again, resiliency, why it's important. If you're someone that has resisted the concept of resiliency, that was me. I'll tell you why I have recently grasped it. If you are someone that is just really having a hard time with the state of the world, is really having a hard time with just challenges constantly coming at you, if you're feeling like it's been really hard for you to navigate setbacks, then today's episode is for you. Also, if you feel like you're going to be going through a major life change, or if you have a major uncertainty in your life, today's episode is also for you. So the first thing I'm going to do is get into resilience, what it is, my journey with it, why I'm talking about it today. So that's the first part. And then I'll get into some examples of resilience, and then we'll end with some tips to be more resilient in today's times. All right. So what is resilience? There's a few definitions that I really like, and I'm going to read a couple of those. So these are some of the definitions that I actually use in my keynotes. But this one is from Elizabeth Edwards, who's an author and attorney. Resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than the one you had before. You could fight it. You could do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept that and try to put together something that's good. So the reason why I really love this definition is because it talks about accepting the new reality. And acceptance is a big concept, I guess, across leadership, across spiritualities. But what acceptance means is, instead of fighting a situation, like maybe a relationship dissolving, maybe losing a job, maybe feeling like certain people don't like you, it's accepting that that's what that is. It's kind of like, also, I've told some of you, or I shared, I think in my last episode, that I listened to Mel Robbins' book recently, Let Them. So it's kind of like the Let Them theory, where you're accepting it and you're letting them be who they are. So let's go back to that losing your job or at work, or maybe you're not in that in crowd, just accepting that that's your reality. And so, as I said before, I used to be someone that was like, resilience, that sucks, because so I'm supposed to be resilient around all these bad things happening to me. But what if these bad things just didn't happen to me? Okay, I get it. Yeah, it's there is a balance with, yeah, sometimes that we could prevent some of the harm being done to us. Yeah. And as leaders, we can do that. And there's also some things that you can't prevent from happening. Like when I talk about my own resilience, and I'll get into this, I talk about some of the deaths in my family that I faced at a young age, or I talk about my parents' divorce at a young age and in my formative years, and how that has affected me more than I think in my life. And so we'll get into all of that. But first of all, this definition, again, acceptance. And another reason why I like that definition of acceptance being a part of this is there's a study done that it was around things that are called positive mental health. So this is like resilience, mental health, well-being. So resilience is considered positive mental health. And I really love to see that and hear that, because again, it's like, think about bees, for example. And bees are a metaphor I use a lot in my keynotes, but just think about all of the climate change going on and how the life of bees and how they adapt has to change all the time, right? They also, when you think about bees, they're also resilient because they're able to take on different roles all the time. And so they're always adapting to the reality of the changes in conditions, extreme weather, temperature changes. So they're always adjusting to their role in their colony as well. And so with these things, with bees, it's just part of life to be resilient. And they're always adapting to different conditions. Some of you probably have pets or plants, as you see, and just think about, for example, a dog's coat. It sheds in the summer. I had a dog that he was a big shedder, and so they shed in the summer, and their coat grows back in the winter. And that's another example of adapting and being resilient. So why is resilient important? Well, I look at it like EQ. And that's emotional intelligence. So I think the more resilience that we have, the more that we can overcome challenges, adapt to change, develop new skills. We're probably going to be healthier. We're going to have better relationships. So it's kind of like, let's go back to that metaphor of like EQ, right? Like EQI and emotional intelligence. So when we have more emotional intelligence, what does that give us access to? What gives us access to better relationships? Gives us access to probably a better life because of those better relationships. It gives us access to more resources. It gives us access to human connection. So who wouldn't want more resilience? Kind of like emotional intelligence. Like, why wouldn't you want more emotional intelligence? Even though it's not the easiest skill to get, but who wouldn't want more of it? So there's this question that when I'm talking about resilience, why do some people tend to have more resilience than others? And another question that is brought up to me quite a bit in my keynotes is, why do some people perceive something as challenging when it's really not? It's kind of like you're looking across the street and the person across the street, let's say they are someone that's homeless, they have nothing, they are struggling, they have no access to healthcare. But then down the street, the next person, they have everything, but then they get upset because they don't get the pair of shoes that they want, or they end up not getting invited on this trip, or it's like things that you think could be frivolous, right? Like why is this person mad about something when they have everything except they weren't invited to this party? Woe is them. Before we think like that, I want to challenge us, because there is a study that was done by a researcher by the name of Michael Unger. And he talked about 7 different tensions that create higher resilience in people. And what are those tensions? Well, 1, access to material resources. 2, relationships. 3, identity. What's your identity? What does that look like? Collective sense of purpose. Spirituality is also in there. 4, power and control. So some people that may not be as resilient, maybe they have had a lot of power and control over their life. So we'll talk about that. Number 5, cultural adherence. Number 6, social justice. And number 7, cohesion. So again, access to material resources, relationships, identity, power and control, cultural adherence, social justice, cohesion. Again, this is a study done by Michael Unger. So now let's get into resilience and how to have a little bit more resilience. And so if you're still listening at this point, I think it's safe to assume you probably want more resilience in your life, and you probably want more tactics to create that. So if you're sitting down, think of a situation that you've recently been in where you wish you had more resilience, where you wish you bounced back better. Okay, just think of that. And then also think of a situation where you did have resilience and you bounced back better. What was that? What did that look like? So my situation, I'll share, is like, so with my mother passing away, my resilience, like I wish I was more resilient, but that was really hard. And that took years and years to kind of work through. And I'm still working through it. And so that's something where I wish I would have had more access to being a little bit more resilient around that. And I would say a situation where I have been more resilient is running a business. Like I'm always adapting. I'm always seeing where I need to go. I'm always like, right now in the US, there's uncertainty. And I always just adapting to that. I'm always understanding that that's the new normal, and I'm always accepting it. And I would say that I did learn some of that from my experience with the loss of my mother, or the loss of a parent. And so, yeah, everybody take a minute and jot that down. So now what I'm going to end with are 3 ways to have more resilience as we move through this complicated world that continues to get more complicated every single day. So the first tip that I have is acceptance. And that's why I chose the definition that I started with. So acceptance doesn't mean rolling over and being irresponsible. What acceptance means is you are accepting the things that you have control over and what you don't. And the things you have control over, you have control over how you respond. You have control over when you respond. You have control over if you respond. You have control over who you form relationships with. So let's go back to that example. You didn't get invited somewhere, or maybe your team is not including you in important discussions, and you tried to be included and it's not happening. Accept and find another place, find something else. But like once you accept, then you're stepping into that resilience zone, because then you're able to adapt and create what your new reality is. If you're still stuck in the old reality, you can't create your new reality. I'll say it again. If you're still stuck in your old reality, you can't create your new reality. And this is the reason why people stay in things that have already expired. They might stay in a job. They might stay in a friendship. They might stay in a romantic relationship. But these are the things that are their old reality, and it's almost like they're afraid to step into their new reality. And guess what? Stepping into a new reality is going to take some level of resilience. And you also pick that up along the way. So number 1, acceptance. Number 2 is remapping your mental models. What do I mean by that? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to go to a situation, and this is another situation that involves loss. And for the last example, I'll use a business example because I know I've been using a lot of loss examples. But my dog passed away 2 years ago, and when he passed away, it was really hard. It was like my first pet that I'd had from puppy to the end. I had him for 13 years. And it was really hard because he was so intertwined with my life. Like he was like, I call him my soulmate. Like he was my soulmate for so many years. He got me through a lot in my life. And so I had learned a lot about loss when I lost JJ. And so what I had to do was I realized remap my brain. And what did that look like? Well, I would walk JJ every day, first thing in the morning and first thing in the evening. So first thing in the morning, first thing in the evening. And so what would happen when he died? What happened? Well, I'd wake up in the morning and I'm like, wait, I have all this time. And then I would get sad. Or the afternoon, it was like my schedule was planned around his schedule. So I would get sad. I would get reminded of these walks and that he wasn't there anymore. And it wasn't that I wasn't dealing with the loss. I was doing that too and celebrating his life. It wasn't that. It wasn't an avoidant thing, but it was like I wanted to make space for more of that stuff instead of getting to those times and just being sad. So what I did is I started remapping my mental models. And so where I started was 7 a.m. I'm going to start going to yoga at 7 a.m. And that's what I did. And I'm still doing that. I did that. I started working out first thing in the morning. And then at night, I started going on walks at night, or I would take a coaching client in the late afternoon, or I would do some writing in the late afternoon. I also signed up for a pottery class in the late afternoon. And so that was really helpful because again, that was remapping my brain to do a different activity. So I wasn't constantly triggered. So again, the second thing is remapping your brain. The third thing I'll say around building resilience, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but building a community. And building communities is more important now than ever. We all need communities. We all need people in our lives who have our backs, who are from a brag buddy to a cry buddy. We need all of that stuff. And so an example of resilience in building community is, like I said, there's been so many shifts recently. I'm recording this podcast on February 4th. It's right now in the United States. We just had a change in administration. There's been a lot of things coming at us, and I'm not getting partisan here, but the thing is, as a small business, you have to understand what's going on. I'm also part of the National Small Business Association. So I'm really thinking about how is this going to affect me and Change Coaches as a small business, and then how will it affect the small business landscape and, tariffs, things like that. And so instead of just obsessing about it, what I've done is I have a community. I built a community over the years, and I'm able to talk to my community about this instead of sitting solo by myself and obsessing about all the things that can go bad. I'm able to talk to my community. And then once you talk to your community, you're able to do a lot more scenario planning. So you're able to step out of that old reality into that new reality. Like I mentioned earlier, again, I'm just stepping out of that old reality into that new reality. So everyone take a minute and look at what you wrote down. So I'll go back, as you're doing that, I'll go back through the 3 tips that I had as far as building resilience. Number 1 is acceptance. Number 2 is remapping your mental models. And number 3 is building community. And speaking of building community, if you didn't listen to the last Leading Below the Surface episode, definitely listen to that one because that's all about building community and social skills. in this changing world. Come back to those things on your sheet of paper. And what will you take from today? Now that you've heard a little bit about resilience, what it looks like which of these tips will you apply to that situation where you didn't have resilience? And what can you learn from the situation where you did have resilience? And how can you, the last question I'll put at you, the last prompt here is, how can you bring all this together to build a resilient 2025? Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.